So it's formal now. The Jeremy Kyle show is history. It's been formally axed. It's history. It's over. This is definitely welcome news. I think it's great that it's been axed, but I can't be too happy about it because it's come on top of a man's death. Suicide connected with the show. Um, I'm going to break this video into sort of two parts. Firstly, talking about the show and why I say good riddance, and secondly, some wider issues around this, because I think this is a good point to reflect on what exactly we consider to be entertainment. I think there's a lot of very grave questions that need to be asked about how we approach the very idea of entertainment. But anyway, a bit about the show itself. Kyle himself was approached about this, and like a card, he kept his cap down and wouldn't answer questions. So, this is a man who has no problem playing judge, jury, and executioner for his guests, and yet when the questions turn on him, he's got no answers, keeps his cap down, avoids the press like a card. Says it all, really. I've never liked the show. I've always had contempt for it. But there's a few things I want to be clear about. My contention with the show is not from a left-right perspective. I'm actually pretty conservative on crime. So my issue was not so much Jeremy Kyle's opinions. For example, if he brought on a guest who was a wife beater or something like that, I'm not going to disagree with him that that is an obnoxious person. My issue with Kyle and his sick show was the astounding hypocrisy of it and the callous lack of care that they showed guests. The Daily Mirror today called Theatre of Cruelty, and I think that's a good summary of the Jeremy Kyle show. And this is some case examples that they've brought up. Harry Henson was left close to suicide after his 2015 appearance. I'm reading from the article here. He went on the show to prove he hadn't stolen golf clubs from his mum's partner and claims he was left homeless and suicidal by his treatment. Harry recalled, "It was really, really, really effing bad. I got disowned by my family because of it and nearly killed myself. I went on convinced I'd be proven innocent. I was really shocked by the lie detector tests, which showed that I'd lied." The thing about lie detector tests is they're not 100%. There is that scope of flaws where it could be, where it can call someone a liar, and there is, as far as I could say, 1% is 1% too high. A decorated Gulf War veteran also says he was driven near to suicide. Fergus Kenny, 49, agreed to go on the show in 2016 after producers said he would be reunified with his estranged daughter. But Kyle branded him a disgrace and he was mercilessly booed. That's pretty consistent with this show. Fergus of Coalville, Leicestershire, said, "If it hadn't been for my kids, I would have killed myself. I was having my whole character assassinated and was being made to look a scumbag. It was set up. After the show, I felt extremely low. I didn't know that, but I was suffering PTSD from my time in the military. I'm not surprised someone has died in an apparent suicide. The show makes entertainment out of people's misery and heartache." And a former producer said, this is also in their main article, "A TV producer hired to film behind the scenes at the Jeremy Kyle show says he was horrified by the level of aftercare given to guests whose lives had been shattered. Gavin Hill claims the ITV show's team ruthlessly broke people who went on the programme, then tried to put them back together in 10 minutes. He said it was distressing to see so many worlds torn apart and so little done to mend them afterwards." So the argument that they looked after their guests, I think, is a cruel joke. There will be some guests who say, "Oh, we were looked after, we had a positive outcome." But one death is one too many, and I doubt that this is the only death suicide connected to the show. I think this one has got attention because it's come immediately after the programme. But this show should have been axed a long time ago. It should have been axed after that scenario where the man was lied to by Kyle and his staff, saying that it would be reconciled with his wife, only for the wife to appear with her new lover. That led to the infamous headbutting incident. On that occasion, the judge said that Kyle should be in the dock as well. And I agreed. It's not often I agree with judges, but I agreed with that. And the whole thing is sick. It's nothing but human bear baiting, it's exploitation by definition. Because what Kyle will do is bring on people, some of them are pretty unpleasant characters. I'm not so naive to say, oh, they're all poor, vulnerable people. There are some pretty unpleasant characters that have appeared on the show over the years. But it's a height of hypocrisy, for example, to bring on a welfare claimant who may be claiming for 9 different children by 7 different women. Then Kyle gives them money. I mean, his self-righteous fans don't seem to consider that point. They'll say, oh, but Jeremy puts them in their place. Yet St. Jeremy also gives them money to appear on the show. That's a bit hypocritical, denouncing people on national TV for taking money from the state, and yet giving them money to appear on the show. It's just stinking hypocrisy. Kyle himself is hardly a role model citizen. This is a man who's a former gambler. He's had several marriages. One of the tabloids had an expose where he was alleged to use cocaine in a nightclub. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, all of this indicates this guy is hardly a role model citizen. Now, I don't think that gamblers should be vilified. I don't think anyone who is struggling with some sort of addiction should be vilified. But when someone who's been through that then goes on to play judge, jury, and execution and play God, it's absolutely despicable. This is a man who's made his fortune off the backs of broken, troubled people. It's entrapment. I mean, if you're an addict, of course you're going to agree to money incentives to go on the show. It's just disgusting how the show took people who were clearly having mental health problems in many cases. And, he would say, oh, we're not here to judge. But then what would he do? He'd stoke up his audience to jeer them off. And as much as I have contempt for Kyle, I also have contempt for his studio audience. These self-righteous people who went on the show to watch the guests, to jeer them off. Why? To feel good about themselves. I think every one of them, anyone who's ever appeared in that show as an audience member, should be feeling bad today. Should be feeling bad about this man's death. And I'm not going to say the guy was a saint. But the point is, when someone has taken their own lives as a consequence of a TV show, there is something seriously wrong with that. There was a case in Brazil where a TV host was actually ordering contract killers to go out and kill people in order to boost ratings for his first on the scene crime exposés. Now, okay, you might argue that's a more drastic example, but it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. And if the Kyle show was allowed to go on unabated, how much more could have happened? This was extreme. And it baffles me that anyone could feel any sort of cause to justify this. I mean, this isn't a left-wing, right-wing issue. It's not a liberal, conservative issue. It's about decency. It's about understanding that people in those situations that the guests were in, they either needed professional psychological help, counselling. Kyle had zero experience in that. He had zero qualifications. And the people he brought onto his show, as far as I'm concerned, they should have been struck off from their field for appearing on the show. I mean, you cannot have a normal situation where people are being viewed by millions of people. The whole concept of reality TV is a facade. It's a sick experiment. The Kyle show is the worst example, but Celebrity Love Island's had 2 deaths associated with it. I wouldn't be surprised if Big Brother has had suicides associated with it. It's time to concede the obvious. Reality TV was a social experiment. It's time now that we look at ourselves and think, what is it we're finding entertaining? I know the shows are popular, and that was always ITV's justification for it. Proof that they care more about ratings and ethics. They've only done this now because of pressure, because it was one step too far. ITV should have done this a long time ago. So I commend them doing it, but I'm not going to overly praise them. Should have been done a long time ago. Um, as for Kyle, if he becomes a pariah, if he finds it hard to get work after this, I'll have zero sympathy. And I would like to think of poetic justice where he gets in such a situation that he has to sign on. Now, that won't happen. He's a millionaire many times over. It's not going to happen. But if he could at least become a pariah and not get any TV work after this, I would have exactly zero sympathy. I mean, what a cruel, cynical creep to make his fortune off doing what he does, playing God. Oh, I'm the world's best father. Really, Kyle? You think you're a good role model? A cynical TV host who makes his fortune off exploiting people? You think that's a good role model for children? So, I've mixed feelings. I'm very happy. I am genuinely happy that it's been axed. That's a good thing. I see it as a good development. But I just feel it's sad that it had to go on this long. And if ITV replaces it with something just as bad, that would be insanely stupid and show that they have absolutely no ethical standards whatsoever. But this is a good time to look at the wider situation. I'm no snowflake. I do not believe in censoring controversial things. For example, I believe there should be a platform for debate. I believe that people with controversial views should be allowed to air their views, but people should be allowed to challenge them. But the point about this show was precisely that it was a show. It wasn't just opinions. It was a physical thing where people were being set up, where they were being misled, where they were given no professional care whatsoever, or nothing sufficient at least. I understand that his pages have been taken down from Facebook. Now, some people will say, oh, Facebook is censoring. But the pages are connected with the show. The show is exploitation. That's not an opinion. That's not just a page that's saying, we feel this way about this subject. It's a page that is promoting a show that involved real people. This wasn't like Jerry Springer, where a lot of it was exaggerated. These were real people, real lives that Kyle was exploiting, that his production team were lying to, that the fans were, just latching onto. I mean, as much as I didn't like seeing Kyle's smug face, I didn't like seeing that smug studio audience as well. And if you were part of it, if you're a Kyle supporter, I say, firstly, you've lost. The show's over. But secondly, you should feel ashamed as well. What the hell gives you a right to go on a show and jeer other people and feel good about yourself? Why? Because they're unpleasant people? Because they're obnoxious? If they were criminals, they should be sentenced in a court of law. Don't you realize that going on the show and jeering them, they were getting money for it? That didn't help anyone. But I can extend this to other things. Why is it as a society we seem to admire bullies? Why is it as a society we find cruelty entertaining? Take the X Factor, for example. Guests who clearly aren't good are deliberately put onto the televised stage just so they could be jeered off by the studio audience. Sometimes they're not even that bad and they're still jeered. And then Kyle and Co can sit there smugly talking down to them. So why let them through in the first place? For no other reason than so that people can jeer them off, so that the judges can get all self-righteous and talk down to them. I have friends who are into the music industry and they despise what music has become, this manufactured industry. I know there have been successful acts have come out of that, but for me, this is just another example of cruelty in entertainment. Having thousands of people jeer people because they're not good enough. It's disgusting. I find it disgusting. Gordon Ramsay, why do people watch his shows? Is it really because they want to see his recipes? Maybe in a few cases. But I think most people watch Ramsay shows because they want to see him yell in someone's face. You know, I'm not calling for a period of the Mary Whitehouse sort of censorship. But even as recently as the 90s, there was far less cruelty. I mean, take, for example, Stars in the Rise. It was a show, if you remember, hosted by Matthew Kelly, where people would, they would imitate the musicians they looked up to, their music idols, for want of a better term. But it wasn't mean spirited. Everything was good natured. They were encouraged. The audience was amicable. They didn't jeer people off. Now that was the sort of entertainment that it was very successful. So something happened around, I would say maybe around the early 2000s. Maybe there was signs of it beginning in the 90s, but particularly around the early 2000s, where the cynical, nasty style of entertainment was starting to creep into the industry, and I find it very depressing. I know they're successful, but just because you don't like to see people exploited or you don't like to see bullying glorified doesn't make you a snowflake. I think controversial subjects. I think there's definitely a place for controversial subjects to be debated, robustly so. And I don't expect everything to be super tame and sanitized. But can we have at least some compassion, at least some decency? The Jeremy Kyle show was probably the worst example, but it isn't the only one. And I hope this is a turning point. I hope other reality TV shows and talk shows really look at themselves and think, what are we really doing here? Are we solely looking at ratings? Money speaks volumes in this world. It really does. But good riddance to the Kyle show. But, there's other things out there. People still seem to find nastiness, callousness, cynicism, these sort of things to be a positive hallmark of entertainment. And they're just not. I really, really, really hope this is a turning point. Good riddance to the Jeremy Kyle show. Long overdue, but good riddance.